Welcome to Dawn of the New Earth. Today, we are talking about the real purpose of Jesus Christ and how to transcend the material world and become more powerful than God, because we are reading the very last section in the banned gospel known as the Sophia of Jesus Christ, and it gets really good. So, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me here today. If you haven't seen the other parts, that's okay. You don't need to see them to understand what we're talking about, but if you want to review them, you certainly can. This is all in a playlist. So we're going to get started right away here. This is going to be a very interesting one because you'll see the way that Gnostics perceive the purpose of Jesus is completely different from how typical Christianity perceives the function of Jesus Christ. In fact, Jesus Christ, in terms of Gnosticism, is much closer to Lucifer, not Satan, but the light bringer. And that's what, Jesus Christ is, the morning star. Even in the Bible, Jesus Christ is called the morning star in Revelation. But anyway, we're going to get started right away. This will all make sense. You'll see what it means. But before we do, as always, please like and subscribe. And if you haven't already, check out my new book, Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Mind, to understand how to achieve higher consciousness in a rational and logical way. The link is in the description of this video. And if you haven't already, please become a member. It helps out a lot. You'll get access to our members only videos. We're having one right after this called How Human Consciousness Breaks Science. It's going to be really interesting. And not only that, but you get access to all of my free lecture note PDF downloads. And right now I have 7 of them all about inner alchemy and self-transformation. And those are all free to members. So you can check them out by becoming a member on YouTube or Patreon. Or if you just want to purchase them by themselves, I'll put a link in the description where you could do that on Patreon if you want. Anyway, enough of that. We are now going to talk about the Sophia of Jesus Christ, the final part, the true purpose of Jesus. So let's get started here. Now, I want to remind you, a lot of people say, hey, where do you get this information? This is from the Nag Hammadi library. And you can read all of these heretical texts for free at a great website called gnosis.org, gnosis.org. All right. Okay. We're going to get started right now. I'm going to read, as a quick review, the paragraph where we left off last time. And then we'll get started with the new stuff. So Jesus is talking. So this is an answer to Mary Magdalene's question. Mary Magdalene has asked Jesus Christ basically like, hey, where do we come from? Where are we going? And what should we do while we're here? That's essentially what Mary has asked Jesus. Where did we come from? Where are we going? What should we do while we're here? And Jesus is in the middle of answering her. And so where we left off, Jesus says, now that I've taught you about immortal man and have loosed the bonds of the robbers from him, I have broken the gates of the pitiless ones in their presence. I have humiliated their malicious intent, and they all have been shamed and have risen from their ignorance. So, as you recall from last time, what essentially Jesus is talking about here, what is immortal man? Immortal man doesn't mean, it's basically like the blueprint for the perfect human. And that's a god, basically. So according to Gnosticism, humans are gods, and when they become trapped in matter, they forget their divine status. So when Christ is talking about the immortal human, he's not talking about like a vampire or something. He's talking about the perfect blueprint, the perfect archetypal form of human that is essentially our God status. So Jesus is saying, I've taught you about immortal man, the true divine essence. And all this stuff about I've loosed the bonds of the robbers and I've broken the gates of the pitiless ones. I've humiliated them, blah, blah, blah. All of this is in relation to the archons. Real quick, the archons are evil beings known as the rulers. That's what archon means, rulers, who keep humanity ensnared in matter and ignorance. And the God of the Bible is considered the chief archon, the chief ruler. So an evil being. So according to Gnosticism, the God of the Bible is actually an evil being that traps humans in matter and wipes their memories or tries to keep them in ignorance from realizing what they are. That's why he says, don't eat from the tree of knowledge. That's why he splits them as a single being into male and female to try and divide their mental faculties. That's why he sends the flood and tries to unalive a bunch of them because they started to wake up. Check out my other videos. I have videos on all this stuff, on the flood and Sodom and Gomorrah and the Tower of Babel and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's what Jesus is talking about. And he continues by saying, because of this, then I came here that they might be joined with the Spirit and breath, and might from two become one, just as from the first, that you might yield much fruit and go up to him who is from the beginning, in ineffable joy and glory and honor and grace of the Father of the universe. So that's where we left off last time. And again, that part is basically talking about, hey, I taught you about what you really are, what we really are. I've broken the chains of ignorance. And because of this, the two can become one, meaning our fractured selves our opposites can unite. This is basically like very advanced psychology, uniting the opposites within so that we can return to the truth of what we actually are and transcend the material world. So that's where we left off. I know I went through that a little fast, but I just wanted to get to the new stuff here. Okay. So here we go. Whoever then knows the Father in pure knowledge will depart to the Father and repose in unbegotten Father. All right. So remember here that when Christ is talking about the Father, so Gnosticism is very different from Christian fundamentalism. Christian fundamentalism takes everything the Bible as being literally true. When we take a psychological approach to Gnosticism, we understand that all of these aspects are symbolic for truth, not to be understood literally, but symbolically. And this is very clear. Gnosticism is all about, here are the secret teachings. These secret teachings are only for those who have eyes to see or ears to hear, not because they're trying to hide it or anything like that, but because it takes a level of consciousness to understand what's happening and what's going on here. So when Jesus is talking about the Father, he's not talking about some guy in the sky on clouds with a beard. It's just basically the source of everything, a domain of light. It's not a personified being. It's not a personal God. It's just it's also called the One, or the Monad, or the invisible Spirit. It's not, and even in the secret book of John, it says it's not right to think of it as God or like a God, because it is more than God. So what Jesus is saying with whoever then knows the Father in pure knowledge will depart to the Father and repose in unbegotten Father. Unbegotten means not born. And the source wasn't born. The source is eternal. That's what that means. So pure knowledge here is referring to gnosis. Gnosis is the Greek word for knowledge. And in Gnosticism, gnosis is more than an intellectual understanding. It implies an intellectual understanding as part of it, but also more of like an intuitive understanding and an experiential knowledge as well. So there's more to it than just like knowing it on paper. It's about intuiting it and really having experiential knowledge. It's kind of everything that you need to transcend, not just one part of it. So this pure knowledge here implies an inner direct understanding of the highest God, the source. It's not even right to call it a God, remember, beyond the powers, which are the archons, the powers, the rulers. These are all names for the beings of ignorance that keep us enchained in darkness, because remember, everything is symbolic here. So God represents the source, and it can also represent our higher self, whereas the archons represent things like ignorance and hate and anger and division and destruction, lower aspects of ourselves that keep us from becoming who we truly are and stepping into our power. So when Jesus says here that whoever knows the Father in pure knowledge will depart to the Father and repose in the begotten Father, means that this understanding, this knowledge, this gnosis leads to one leaving the mortal state behind, and the knowers, the persons who has achieved gnosis, their spirit returns to rest in the pleroma. And what is the pleroma? The pleroma is also known as the fullness. The fullness of the fullness of what? Of divine light. It's a realm of pure light. It's very simple. Sometimes the pleroma and the source are used interchangeably, but they're not really. It's the pleroma is kind of like the realm of the source. It's the perfect realm of light, which relies on the source for its existence. And so it's kind of like the highest level of reality. And that's basically what Jesus is saying here. When you know the source, you're going to transcend the material world and return to the realm of divine light. That's essentially what's being said here. Okay. Let's see. There's more to it though. Where am I at? Here we go. But whoever knows him defectively. Right, so we just talked about people who know the Father in pure knowledge. Now Jesus is talking about people who know the Father or the source defectively. Whoever knows him defectively will depart to the defect and the rest of the eighth. So basically, this is talking about those who have an imperfect or incomplete understanding of the source. Now, it's not total ignorance. It's just incomplete. It's partial or defective gnosis. Not like totally evil or something. It's just not complete. So those who have a defective understanding of the source remain within lesser realms, and it's described as the defect. And this is referencing the defect. The defect you'll often hear. So the Gnostics believe the material world was evil. I don't believe that. I like a lot of things that Gnosticism has to say. That's one thing. One of several things I disagree with Gnosticism about is that they view the material world as evil. I don't think so, but they do, and that's why they say it's defective. And the material world, you can kind of think of it as like being defective because it's not perfect. But the defects are actually kind of what make it interesting, because total perfection is just stillness. Nothing ever really happens. Nothing ever really changes. In fact, in Gnosticism, it's called the silence, and that would be quite boring. So this chaos that's introduced is what allows us to have an experience in the spatial temporal realm. It can be extremely chaotic at first, but that's why we have to begin to order it. So chaos and order aren't enemies. They're more complementary. They need each other. Too much chaos is hell. Too much order is hell. We need the balance. We need that dialectical balance between chaos and order. Anyway, but when you hear them refer to the defect, in Gnosticism, it's usually referring to the material world or some lower realms in some way. Realms that arose from ignorance because it's lacking something. And that's essentially what it's saying here. Those who aren't lacking, right? Those who have perfect knowledge are going to go all the way up to the pleroma. Those who have defective knowledge or imperfect knowledge or not complete knowledge, well, they're not going to go all the way up to the pleroma because they themselves then have a defect in some way. They have partial knowledge, so they're not going to go to the perfect realm. They're going to go to a partially developed realm that reflects it. You see, where they go is reflected by their level of consciousness. So that's an important thing to understand in Gnosticism. In Gnosticism, where you end up is not about sin or salvation. It's not praying to God. It's not about trying to avoid sin and doing good deeds. Where you go or where you end up is reflective of your level of consciousness. You have a perfect understanding, you're going to go to the perfect realm. You have partial understanding, you're going to go to a partial realm. Again, I'm not saying that this is literally true, but it is symbolic for our understanding of how the world works. When we have a perfect understanding of reality, we're going to exist in a higher state of consciousness. When we have an imperfect understanding of reality, well, we're going to have an imperfect consciousness, and we want to. So you can see people who have a very low state of consciousness, that is, are in ignorance, often leads to a lot of chaos and destruction in the world, like we can see right now. See all the bullshit going on in the world right now. Where does that come from? Ignorance. Comes from ignorance. It all stems from ignorance. And because we live in a world where humans are in a state of ignorance, we live in a very flawed world, a very chaotic and imperfect world. Remember, too much chaos is hell, and then too much order can become hell. Well, right now we live in a world with too much chaos. But it doesn't need to be that way. It doesn't need to be that way. We can transform this world into the kingdom of heaven on earth. That's why Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is within you and all around you. You just need to see it. You need to, as Jesus says, recognize what is right in front of you. So let's see. Where am I here? Okay, so you have this defective realm. And so it talks about the eighth. What is the eighth? It says the people who have a defective understanding are going to go to the eighth. So usually the eighth, Gnosticism isn't always consistent, but the eighth usually refers to a realm that's just above the archonic domains and just below the highest heavens. So it's kind of an in-between state. You're not you're not in the archon's realm of matter and chaos. You're above that, but you're not at the level of the pleroma. You're kind of like at an in-between stage. So if the knowledge here is defective, one doesn't fully ascend to the pleroma. They remain in a lower spiritual domain, not a chaotic domain, but there's still defect there, essentially. So, this is interesting. Kind of case in point here. Now, whoever knows the immortal spirit of light in silence, through reflecting and consent in the truth, let him bring me signs of the invisible one, and he will become a light in the spirit of silence. Talking about, I just mentioned silence, right? So what's talking about? What the heck is Christ talking about? Well, Christ is, and remember, we still haven't really talked about what Christ is and what his purpose is and what his function is, but that'll become clear in just a minute. So Jesus says, knows immortal spirit of light in silence. Whoever, where was this? Whoever knows the immortal spirit of light in silence. This is talking about, again, an awareness that's beyond words. That's what that means. To understand it, to know the immortal spirit of light in silence through reflecting is essentially, that's what that means. You cannot be spoken. It's beyond words. It's not able to be, it's ineffable. You can't put it in human language. It's beyond human language. And one of the reasons why this is true is because human language is very flawed. One reason why that human language is very flawed is because it's very static and still. It doesn't move. Like take the word cat, for example. That word doesn't change. It's just a noise and it stays the same. Mathematics is different though. So this is why we can understand reality very well. And in the formal aspect perfectly through mathematics is because mathematics is able to introduce motion. So when you see mathematics, it has like variables and things like that. It expresses motion. That's why mathematics is very good at modeling the physical world, the world of motion. And so reality is the ultimate reality is a realm of light. And so mathematics is very good at math. Light is in motion, and mathematics can perfectly represent that through properties like sinusoidal waves, phase, amplitude, frequency, wavelength, etc. These are all properties, and by introducing variables, they don't just sit there. It can represent motion and transformation. Anyway, you know the immortal spirit in silence because it's ineffable. And Jesus says, through reflecting and consent in the truth, let him bring me signs of the invisible one, and he will become a light in the spirit of silence. Whoever knows okay, so bring me signs of the invisible one means demonstrating your inner transformation. Jesus is basically saying, hey, look, if you know the truth, it's not something you can speak. It's beyond words. So bring me signs of the invisible one. Show me you know what you're talking about. So this means demonstrating your inner transformation. How you act, what you do will show that you understand, aka actions speak louder than words. Or in this case, actions are more true than words. In this case, because it's ineffable. So Jesus is saying, hey, you can't talk about this, but if you really know it, bring me signs that you know it. And if you do that, you will become a light in the spirit of silence. And that means that by attaining this silent, transcendent unity, the person becomes a beacon of that same divine light. He will become a light in the spirit of silence. So basically what Jesus is taught, because remember, Mary asked, hey, where did we come from? What did we do here? And where are we going? In the previous videos, Jesus already answered where we came from. So now Jesus is explaining where you're going. And he's basically saying, if you have perfect knowledge, you will go to the perfect realm. If you have partial knowledge, you'll go to a defective realm, not a horrible realm, but a defective realm. And if you have true understanding, demonstrate that you have true understanding, and then you will ascend to the realms of light. And so it continues by saying, whoever knows Son of Man in knowledge and love, let him bring me a sign of Son of Man, that he might depart to the dwelling place with those in the eighth. Again, the eighth. So knowing the Son of Man refers to the, like I mentioned earlier, that archetypal human or the true divine self. We could also consider it like the Christ principle. Now, when it says in knowledge and love, this is representing dual principles, different aspects, right? So on one hand, you have understanding and knowledge, and on the other, you have love and unity. One is more of a logos understanding, and the other is more of like an eros understanding. Love, unity, knowledge, understanding. You see, you have to have both together. So Jesus is saying, show me that you understand this in knowledge and love, in understanding and in experience. And bring me a sign means, again, like we said before, this is like manifesting qualities that show evidence of real spiritual transformation. So basically, you're demonstrating that you have actually, and this doesn't mean like turning water into wine or anything like that. It means live in a way that will show that you have understood what this is really about. And it's like show the fruits of your labor, the fruits of your mental transformation. And then it says that he might depart to the dwelling places with those in the eighth. And so the people who do this are going to go to those higher dwelling places. Again, it's not like the most perfect realm, but basically Jesus is describing different ways that people will get to different levels of reality. Now, once again, I just want to reiterate this because this is not literally true, but it represents different levels of consciousness. Remember, the kingdom is within you and all around you. It's not under the sea. It's not in the sky. It's not in a place where you go and die. It's not a place where you go to after you die. Definitely not a place where you go to and die. So that's what's happening here. He's describing these different levels, and we interpret this as different levels of consciousness. Let's continue here. I could keep talking, I could, but I want to be able to finish up this particular gospel today. Behold, I have revealed to you the name of the perfect one, the whole will of the mother of the holy angels, that the masculine multitude may be completed here, that there might appear in the eons the infinities and those that came to be in the untraceable wealth of the great invisible spirit, that they all might take from his goodness. Even the wealth of their rest has no kingdom over it. That was a very long sentence, Jesus. Jesus needs to take some breaths, take some sips of wine, have some loaves of bread. Okay, so what's Jesus talking? There's a lot here. So, behold, I have revealed to you the name of the perfect one. The perfect one should be pretty clear by now. That's the source, the highest ineffable one. Now, notice here, though, that Jesus says, I revealed it to you. So before we continue, let's talk about Christ's real purpose. Okay? Christ's real purpose. So in fundamentalist Christianity, what is Jesus here to do? Jesus is here to save people from their sins. That's why he died on the cross, to be washed in the blood of Jesus. That's a very weird thing, by the way. You ever think about how weird that? People say that all the time. It's weird. I don't want to be washed in no one's blood. But anyway, I want to take a bath after I was drenched in blood, if you ask me. Very weird. I know it's symbolic, it's allegorical. Okay, I get that. But according to fundamentalist Christianity, you're sinful, you're dirty, you're flawed, you're fucked up. And the only way that you're going to get to heaven and avoid hell is if you praise and worship Jesus Christ. He has to save you. You're not divine. You're inherently broken. That's original sin. You're not a divine being. You are a created being that's broken. And your only hope is to believe in Jesus so that Jesus will save you from your dirty brokenness. How shitty you are. Christianity is such a negative religion. You're inherently shit. So you need Jesus to save you from your shittiness so that you aren't tortured for eternity. That's basically the function of Christ and what he has become today, which is not what he is. Jesus's function in Gnosticism is much closer to Lucifer. Now, not Satan. Lucifer and Satan are different archetypes. Think of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll is like Lucifer. Mr. Hyde is like Satan. You wouldn't say Dr. Jekyll is Mr. Hyde, because guess what? You'd have a very different experience if you met Dr. Jekyll versus meeting Mr. Hyde. They're different aspects. So Satan is like the shadow of Lucifer. It's the shadow aspect, the dark aspect. And Lucifer is a bringer of light, the morning star. In fact, Jesus is called a Lucifer. In Revelation, Jesus is called a Lucifer because Lucifer means morning star. And in Revelation, it says Jesus is the morning star. Jesus is the Lucifer. So it's that function of bringing light, bringing knowledge. And in the secret gospel of John, Jesus reveals to John that he was the one in the Garden of Eden that gave the fruit of knowledge to Adam and Eve to eat. So what Jesus represents in Gnosticism, the purpose of Jesus, is to reveal, not to save. Sometimes in Gnosticism, Jesus is called the Savior, but the Savior here really means the revealer, saving one from, not from sin, from ignorance, by revelation, by revealing. So the function of Jesus is to show you something. That's what it is. He's not some super being that you need to pledge subservience to for eternity and play the harp all day. He's a teacher. That's what he is. I mean, so obvious. That's what he's called in the Bible. Jesus is a teacher. Jesus represents a revealer. Very similar to the Luciferian. Lucifer, Sophia, and Jesus are very similar archetypes. Sophia is wisdom. Lucifer, the light bringer. Jesus, the morning star. Jesus, the light of the world. All very, very, very similar. Slightly different, but very, very similar. So, what was I saying? Yeah. So Jesus's function is the revealer, to reveal information, not to save you, but to reveal. So, and this will become more clear, but let's continue. Let's see. So behold, I have revealed to you the name of the perfect one, the whole will of the mother of the holy angels, that the masculine multitude may be completed here, that there might appear in the eons, the infinities, and those that came to be. He says a lot, so let's just stop it here. The whole will of the mother of the holy angels, that the masculine multitude may be completed here. Let's talk about that part. So the mother of the holy angels is Sophia. We are just talking about Sophia. So you see, they're very, very closely related. What did Jesus do? Jesus is the revealer. What did Jesus reveal? The name of the perfect one and the will of Sophia. So you see, they're very, like, Jesus is like a vehicle for Sophia. And you could think of Sophia's consort as like being Lucifer. Now, she's not explicitly said that in Gnosticism. Okay, that's my personal interpretation. In Gnosticism, Lucifer, her consort is called Adam, Eye of Light. But very, very similar here. But you can see how you have this sort of triad of the Eye of Light, Sophia, and Jesus. Now, Eye of Light and Sophia are actually a single being, where Sophia is the feminine aspect and the Eye of Light is the masculine aspect. And Jesus is the birth from their union, an emanation from their union. Now, we always have to, in Gnosticism, it's always a little more complicated than that, because Jesus actually precedes them, but also emanates from them. Because it's basically, when you start to look at all the different beings in Gnosticism, it's all the same being, just different reflections of each other. Like, oh, this is the male aspect. This is the female aspect. This is the child aspect. This is the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is the vehicle of this aspect and whatever. And also, I really want to point out again, because I always have to point this out because people always get confused about this and it really annoys me. Masculine and feminine don't literally have anything to do with biological sex or even cultural gender identification. Masculine and feminine are just ways of talking about extreme polarities that are complementary. So masculine and feminine just means forces. You could call them positive or negative. You could call them positive and negative. You could call them logos and eros. You could call them active and receptive, hot and cold. All right. So I just want to make that really clear. It's just talking about energies and functions. Just like in alchemy, we know that turning metal into gold isn't literally about lead into gold. It's about the evolution of the soul. So fire doesn't really refer to fire, it refers to the will. Water doesn't really refer to water, it refers to the emotions and intuition and the unconscious. Same thing here. When we talk about like the masculine, feminine, you don't even have to think about that. You can think of left brain, right brain, positive, negative, just different poles that interact in a certain way that are complementary, that work together. That's it. Just in story form, that's how they expressed it. I just want to make that clear because I'm seeing a lot of people in the esoteric community using stuff like this as an excuse to be assholes and trying to enforce like traditional gender roles or to like erase certain gender identities. That's dumb. It's really stupid. Basically, what's cool about this stuff is that when you get to the higher realms, it's beyond gender. Most of these beings are androgynous. Most of these beings are androgynous. And in fact, even if you have a being like Barbelo, who is considered the Great Mother, guess what she's also called? The Mother Father. It's not, just to be clear, I just want to make that clear because especially how the world is right now, people are being really uneducated about this. And it's appearing in the esoteric community as well, which is not good. This is about certain forces, certain aspects. Anyway, so the mother of the holy angels, Jesus reveals the mother of the holy angels. So he is like the vehicle of revelation of wisdom. So do you see how they're very similar aspects? Sophia is wisdom. Jesus is the revelation of wisdom, the vehicle for that revelation. Sophia is wisdom sitting up there in a higher realm. Jesus is the vehicle to bring the light. And this is all metaphorical for how the processes of our own minds, our own psyches, reaching different levels of higher consciousness, coming to different realizations, etc. So, just want to make a note to myself here. Sometimes I just have epiphanies that I want to remind myself to talk about later. Okay, where are we at here? The whole will of the mother of the holy angels that the masculine multitude may be completed here. So the mother of the holy angels is Sophia. And what is her will? Because Jesus reveals the will of the Holy Mother. Her will is that the drops of light, we talked about this earlier, the drops of light, which are souls, might achieve gnosis, knowledge, and ascend to the pleroma. So you have all these different functions working together. You have Sophia, which represents wisdom, and you have Jesus, who's the revealer of wisdom. And in how I interpret things, Lucifer represents knowledge. That's my interpretation, but that's how I interpret it. So you have this interplay of wisdom that is being revealed, and then turned into knowledge, gnosis. So you can see how they're different, but they're very similar. They're working together, and these are aspects of your mind working together. Getting information, understanding that information becoming knowledge and gnosis or experiences, etc. But it continues by saying, the whole will of the mother of the holy angels, that the masculine multitude might be completed here. What is completed? Well, if they need to be completed, that means they're missing something. So in other words, what's happening here is that Jesus, the revealer, has revealed the divine plan and the source and the will of the feminine divine principle, Sophia, wisdom. And when it continues to say that the masculine multitude may be completed here, that there might appear in the eons the infinities and those that came to be the untraceable wealth of the great invisible spirit, that they all may take from his goodness, even the wealth of their rest has no kingdom over it. So what this is talking about here is the fact that, well, think about it this way. Jesus was just talking about the will of Sophia. What does Sophia represent? The great feminine principle. And so that the masculine multitude may be completed means that they receive that which is missing, that wisdom. And so that they can obtain that wisdom and ultimately achieve knowledge and gnosis. So they are, the masculine multitude doesn't mean a bunch of men. That's not what that means. It means missing the feminine principle. It gets so confusing talking in terms of male and female. It's missing wisdom. And Jesus reveals the wisdom, that which is missing, knowledge, and so that it can become knowledge and gnosis. Okay? So it's not literal biological sex here. This is an interplay of what, in terms of Gnosticism, represents masculine and feminine principles coming together, leading to wholeness. And remember, this is all within us. So we all have these masculine and feminine principles, or left brain, right brain principles, or positive and negative polarities within us, which is intuition versus sensing, thinking versus feeling, etc. It's about balancing all these to achieve wholeness and unity. In Jungian terms, this is called individuation. And then it talks about the inner wealth and no kingdom over it, right? It says so that they'll be completed, that the infinities and those that came to be in the untraceable wealth of the great invisible spirit, that they all might take from his goodness, even the wealth of their rest that has no kingdom over it. Okay, so wealth, again, you'll hear the metaphor of wealth always when it's talked about like achieving gnosis. It's in the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says, if you don't know what you are, if you're ignorant, you're in poverty. And this is talking about when you do know what you are, you're in riches. Of course, not literal riches. Very similar to alchemy. It's the gold of the soul, of the transformed soul. It's basically alchemy is what it's talking about here. And that no king, what is it saying? No kingdom, with no kingdom over it. What does that mean? No rulers. You're not ruled. You have become perfected. You have been transformed. You have evolved. And there are no rulers over you. Pretty good, right? A lot different than mainstream Christianity, where you're always fucking ruled by a tyrant. Big difference. Okay. Let's see here. I lost my place. I came from first who was sent, that I might reveal to you him who is from the beginning, because of the arrogance of Archbegetter and his angels, since they say about themselves that they are gods. So first who was sent, it's the source. We've been talking about that again and again and again. And Christ, or the revealer, has the purpose of revealing that. The knowledge, the wisdom, the understanding, the catalyst for you to realize that there's a source to reality. This is the primal source, the ground of existence, where everything emanates from. Now, when it's talking about Archbegetter and his angels, Archbegetter, and that's the demiurge, the demiurgus, the archon. That's the god of the Bible, the asshole, the big dick in the sky who gets really pissed if people eat fruit. So when Jesus says that he, what's he say? To reveal the arrogance of the Archbegetters and the angels, since they themselves think that they're gods. So the archon of this world, the demiurge, the god of the Bible, falsely believes that he's the supreme God. That's why he says, I am God, there is no other God but me. And in fact, in Gnosticism, when he says that, it says that he sins against everything because he's not the only God. And when he says that, a voice from the sky booms down, goes, don't lie. It's very funny. Anyway, and it's basically his mom, Sophia. Sophia is like getting his mom got mad at him. So this lesser creator being and all of his angels are very arrogant. They think that they're God, and they don't know that this higher God exists, this higher source. They don't know that that source exists. They're ignorant. They don't know. They literally don't know that it exists. So in Gnosticism, the demiurge is like kind of aware that his mother exists, like sort of, but that's about it. He pretty much thinks that he is the most powerful being in the world. And he represents the ego, by the way. Can also represent the shadow self. The demiurge and the archons can represent the shadow self or the ego. I think it's handy to think of it in terms of the ego because it fits very, very well. I am God and there is no God but me. That's what the ego says. I am the true I. There is no I but me. Well, yeah, of course there is. There's your higher self. Your ego is just a small part of you. The demiurge is just one part of creation. There's a whole pleroma, high realms of divine light that are beyond him. So Jesus continues by saying, and I came to remove them from their blindness. Now, this is interesting. I came to remove them from their blindness, that I might tell everyone about the God who is above the universe. So Christ's mission as the revealer is to lift the veil of ignorance or blindness, even from these archons and from humanity as well. So, different versions of Gnosticism have different ideas of like what the archons are, if they're good, if they're bad, or if they're just dumb. In some forms of Gnosticism, they're totally evil. In other forms of Gnosticism, they're just kind of stupid and don't really know what they're doing and like to fight all the time. And in some of them, they're totally condemned, and in other versions, they can be redeemed. In this version, it seems they can be redeemed. And I like that interpretation because the archons aren't necessarily evil, just like the material world isn't necessarily evil. It can be, but it's not. It's like your ego. Your ego is not evil. It's what allows you to have self-awareness and identity. But even though it allows for those things, you don't want to identify with your ego because it can become evil. If you have an inflated ego, if you become narcissistic, if you start thinking that you are God as in the only God, it's just no problem thinking if you're God if you realize that we're a community of gods. We're all God. But if you start, thinking that you're the best, you're the greatest, and everyone is below you and must worship you, then that's what, so the demiurge and the archons are like that. They're not necessarily evil. They're like think about the archons as well. Like some archons represent anger. In general, angers can get you in a lot of trouble. But guess what? sometimes it's good to get angry about stuff. Sometimes anger helps fuel your passion to make change. So in Gnosticism, it's more about like, oh, the archons are evil and you have to overcome them. In our system, we understand that we're both beings of dark and light. We have a much more Jungian perspective where we integrate shadow and light together. So it would be about learning how to use these forces in service to our higher will. So we don't want to try and like destroy them or eliminate them or get rid of them. That's not possible. You can't do that. Energy can't be created or destroyed, but it can be transformed. And that's what we have to do with these archonic forces, and realize that these forces aren't necessarily evil in and of themselves. They just represent, chaotic, wrathful, angry, vengeful. Like think about Lilith, for example. I love Lilith. Now, Lilith isn't in Gnosticism. Lilith is a concept that's more tied to Judaism, particularly Kabbalah. But Lilith would be considered like an evil. She's technically a klipot. She's an evil being. But she's not really. What Lilith represents is chaos and destruction and individuality and rebellion and freedom from oppressive roles and a lot of different aspects like this. So it can be, if you let that run wild, yeah, that can get you in a lot of trouble. But if you use that energy in a way that's directed towards systems of oppression, then it's actually a powerful force that's in line with your higher will. It's working with you. And so angelic powers and archonic powers, or eonic powers and archonic powers, and angelic powers or klipotic powers aren't necessarily good or bad. They just represent different things. Like angels are usually more associated with consciousness and higher consciousness. Eons and angels are associated with like consciousness and higher consciousness. Peace, love, harmony. Archons or klipot are generally associated with the unconscious, not always, but usually like the unconscious, the shadow, chaos, rebellion, destruction, but also things like individuality, freedom, creativity. That's very much within the shadow. So it's just about you. There's a time and a place for everything, and learning how to synthesize it and get it all to work together so that it's in line with your elevated will. Because you always want to be working to achieve elevated will. I talk about that a lot in my book, Psychogenesis, by the way, in the part on will forming. Understanding elevated will is very important, because you can have something that you desire, but if you don't actually do it, you're not achieving your elevated will. You just have basic will. You're run by your desires rather than your elevated state of mind. And that's the whole point here. You want to make sure you're run by an elevated state of mind where your quote unquote lower aspects are working with it and for it and towards your goals. Anyway, let's see. So Jesus is talking about removing the blindness from these archons and humanity by announcing and revealing the existence of the one above the universe. So this is totally different from the demiurge, who rules the material world, but not the true self. And so humans are more powerful than the archons. Because remember, archons represent aspects of you. So are you more powerful than your ego? Because the demiurge represents your ego. Of course you are. You're more than that. But if you are a slave to your ego, you're a slave to the demiurge. He rules you. If you're a slave to your desires, if you're a slave to your passions, if you're a slave to your emotions, if you're a slave to your anger, you're a servant of the rulers, of the archons. But if you use all of those to your advantage, use it to express your creativity, to contribute to causes that you care about, fighting for truth and justice, in, these aspects aren't necessarily bad. You just don't want them to rule you. You want them to be working for you. And that's one of the biggest things to understand that most people get wrong. They usually try to defeat these parts of themselves or ignore them or suppress them, where it's about recognizing them, acknowledging them, and working with them. And that's what people always ask me, like, well, what do you mean that humans are more powerful than God, like the creator God? Well, the creator God represents your ego, and you are more powerful than your ego, but not if it rules you. I mean, inherently you are, but you're in bondage and in ignorance. And that's where, do you see how this all comes together? You are ruled by your ego. You're ruled by the archons. You're ruled by the demiurge. Christ reveals wisdom, and that's you beginning to encounter information, experiences that begin to open your mind, which gets transformed into knowledge, which allows you to defeat the archons by transcending. Now, of course, we don't technically want to defeat. We just want to like demote them. Be like, hey, you're not the ruler here. I'm the ruler. You're not the ruler. I rule myself. You don't rule me. And that's you talking to your ego, basically. Like your higher self to your ego. Hey, you're cool. You do a good job, but you can't be calling all the shots here. That's essentially what it's about. So let's continue. Therefore, tread upon their graves, humiliate their malicious intent, and break their yoke and arouse my own. I have given you authority over all things as sons of light, that you might tread upon their power with your feet. So tread upon their graves and break their yoke. What is this about? This is symbolic for overcoming what we were just talking about, the dominion of the archons, the rulers. Remember how I just said that it's like they keep you, your lower aspects or dark aspects or unconscious aspects can control you, or even just like your egoic aspects can control you. And Christ says to break their yoke. So if you don't know, probably most of you do, but a yoke is a wooden frame that you put on two animals. So it goes over two animals, a wooden frame, so that they can pull a cart or a plow. So it's for getting animals to work for you. So basically, Jesus is saying you are yoked by the rulers. They're controlling you. You need to break that yoke so that you can become free. That's exactly what we're talking about here. You see how silly it is when you take this stuff literally, but how enlightening it is when you understand the symbolism? That's why the Bible is very silly when you think that it's literally true. But when you start to understand the symbolism, there's a lot to learn there. So, okay, so to arouse my own, to awaken the divine spark. Let's see. I have given you authority over all things as sons of light, that you might tread upon the power with your feet. So here, remember that Mary asked, where did we come from? Where are we going? Isn't that a song, Cotton Eye Joe? And what are we supposed to do here? So Jesus, in previous episodes, we've seen where they came from. They came from the source and the emanations. Where they're going, Jesus talked about the different like levels where you can get to. Now, what do? Well, the Savior or revealer or Jesus grants the disciples, who are the sons of light, the spiritual authority to overcome the archon's oppressive power. Okay, so here you have essentially that Jesus is saying that you are the sons of light. You are the sons of the living Father. And this is the part where when the disciples, or just anyone, understands this wisdom and knowledge, they're no longer Christians, but a Christ. That's what the Gospel of Philip says. Those who understand what Jesus is talking about are, quote, no longer Christians, but a Christ. So this is essentially what Jesus is saying, that when you understand this, you will be the sons of light. You will be Christs. What does that mean? Well, what was the function of Jesus? A revealer. And so when the disciples or anyone becomes a Christ, what does that mean? It means they have the function of being a revealer. That's what that means. So it says, these are the things that the blessed Savior said, and he disappeared from them. Then all the disciples were in great ineffable joy in the Spirit from that day on, and his disciples began to preach the gospel of God, the eternal, imperishable Spirit. Amen. So what does Jesus do? He leaves, he jets. Why? Because remember, it's all symbolic. And it's a very common theme in Gnosticism where the risen Christ or the revealer departs after revealing the hidden knowledge. In other words, he reveals and he's out. He did his job. His job is done. No worship required. No harp stringing necessary. Jesus is not a literal being. It's the archetype of revelation. The revelation is there. You got it. Now it's your job. Now that the revelation has occurred, you understand. Now you are the Christ. That's why Jesus disappears. Jesus is no longer necessary because you are the Christ now. That's what it means by the disciples they start spreading gnosis or knowledge because they became Christs. Now they are the revealers. And that's exactly why we are Christs. That's why I say we are Christs. We are the second coming of Christ. Now, that doesn't, it doesn't mean that like, oh, we're Jesus reincarnated from a past. No, it means that for those of us that have understood what reality is, and we are now revealing it to others, that is the function of a Christ. You can call it, you don't have to call that. You can call it whatever you want. But that's what that archetypal symbol represents, the revealer of information. So that is the true purpose of Jesus Christ. The true purpose of Jesus Christ is not to save the world from sin, but rather to reveal wisdom. Sophia's will, wisdom's will. Jesus reveals wisdom. The messenger of Sophia, the messenger of wisdom. That's what the purpose of Jesus is. When we gain knowledge from that wisdom, when we understand it, when we have knowledge of it, when we have gnosis, we become Christs because now we are going to reveal it. We become a beacon of light to reveal to the world. And now we are, in that sense, the revealers of wisdom. And of course, in that sense, we are higher than the God of the Bible, the Demiurgos, because we have transcended the ego. We haven't destroyed it. It's just working for us now. We are the higher self. We are the true self. We are the inner star. The ego is a function of consciousness. And we are enacting our elevated will in the world to reveal to others what we are, where we are, and why we're here. That's how we create a new world. Now, the world's in a real fucked up place, real shitty place. And, there's a lot of things we can do, like try and get legislation passed and all that. I know a lot of people are trying to do that. And whatever people are trying to do, that's fine. It's great to try and do that. But the problem is, it's like, this is a sinking ship and there's holes popping up everywhere. And you can try and plug all the holes you want, but so many more, for every hole you plug up, 3 more spring up. So you're just kind of slowing it down. You do want to slow it down. It's not a bad thing. But people ask like, well, how do you change the world? The only way to have real, sustainable, lasting change is to transform consciousness. Because if people don't know what they are, where they are, and why they are here, they are always going to be fighting with each other. Because they don't understand that we're all in this together. They don't understand that we are one. We are the one reflected in different aspects of each other. They're in self-awareness. They haven't reached all awareness. While they're still in self-aware mode, everything in their perspective is divisions and separation. Oh, you're different. You're a different race. You're a different gender. You're a different religion. You're a different nationality. You are a threat to me. I'm better than you. I deserve this. You don't. Self-awareness is a necessary stage, but it's predicated on division. That's what self-awareness does. I am not you. That's what self-awareness reveals. All awareness reveals that is an illusion, because underneath everything, we're all interconnected. So self-awareness is a next necessary dialectical step that will be transcended, where we still realize that we are individuals, but in an interconnected system. You see the difference? We are individuals, but we are not inherently separate. We are individuals that are inherently connected together. And that's the only way for real, true, sustainable, lasting change, is to spread this light of consciousness. Because look around all the bullshit in the world. It's caused by oligarchy, rich billionaire assholes. It's caused by religious extremists fighting amongst each other. It's and you see that this is all based on levels of consciousness. People who are in a fundamentalist religious mindset, or people who are in a egoic, demiurgic, ruler, greedy mindset. Everything is a product of the mind. Everything is a projection of the mind. So we will only change the world when we change ourselves, and then help others as well. So that's the way to do it. That's the way to change things. I know it's a real shitty time right now, but this is the way that we can move forward and actually have lasting change. Now, there's a lot in the meantime that can be done. And I know a lot of people are, of course, trying more like in the moment things to help, and that's great. But just remember, for true, lasting, sustainable change, it's about transforming consciousness. That's there's no other way to do it. There's no other way. It's like, if you had a bunch of, like a zoo, if you have a zoo, you're not going to be able to get the animals in the zoo to form a society or a government. That level of consciousness required to do that is not where they're at. And I love animals. I'm not saying anything negative about animals. I'm anti-zoo, actually, by the way, because I'm vegan, and I think that's mean. But my point is that clearly you can see wild animals can't form governments and societies. Humans are at a higher level of consciousness and can form governments and societies, but very divided ones that are opposed to one another because they're in a self-aware survival mindset rather than an all-aware thriving mindset. And so a new level of consciousness is required to create a new teleocratic planetary civilization, which I talk about in my 4th book, Teleocracy, Creating the New Earth. And that's what we need. And then once we do that, guess what? We can actually enjoy this place, and no one will be like, oh my God, this is hell. I never want to incarnate here anymore. It's awful. It's only awful because we have awful people making it shitty. Doesn't have to be that way. Like Jesus says in the Gospel of Thomas, the kingdom of heaven is within you and all around you. This is our kingdom. We just need to be the ones to create it, to manifest it. So you have that power. I have that power. We all have that power. And don't let anyone tell you you don't, because you do. It's up to you. It's up to us. It's up to all of us here working together. This is it. This is the game. This is what we're playing. It's right now. We're not just like spectators. This is not like a passive reading of a book. We are in the book. We are in the game. We are creating that narrative right here and right now. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, my friends. That was the final section of the Gospel of Sophia. Or not the Gospel of Sophia, the Sophia of Jesus Christ. I really liked it. I hope you did too. We will continue to read more Gnostic scriptures probably next Thursday. This coming Monday, we're doing a video on alchemy, which is about inner transformation of the soul, which is the 4th stage of conjunction, which is about uniting opposites together, which is going to be really interesting. So make sure that you're there for that. Check out my books. If you don't know where to begin, start with the first one, Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Mind. You can check out my alchemy notes as well within the description of this video. And follow me on Spotify and become a member. Do all the things. It helps out a lot. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much, my friends. I want to give a big shout out to everyone who supports. I know I need to update the members list. I will do that probably this weekend. So big shout out to Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, DB, Nucelina, Dallas, Digital Tech, David, LaDonna, Grace, Kira, Val, and everyone else. Thank you very much.